let's get into this. This is Phyllis Light, everyone. We're live for Love of Health web show. I'm Laura Baum. Good to see y'all. I'm Phyllis Light. Is a fourth generation herbalist and healer and has studied and worked with herbs, foods, and other healing techniques for over 30 years. Her studies in traditional Southern folk medicine began in the deep woods of North Alabama with lessons from her grandmother, whose herbal and healing knowledge had its roots in her Creek Cherokee heritage. Phyllis's studies continued as an apprentice with the late Tommy Bass, a nationally renowned folk herbalist from Sand Rock, Alabama, as well as other herbal elders throughout the Appalachians and the Deep South. I did have the privilege of meeting you, Phyllis, in person when your first book, Southern Folk Medicine, did come out. And you signed my copy. And thank you again for that. And I got to see the landscape and the interesting geography of that area. And it just felt also very, like small town, small community. And you can almost feel the sensation of maybe what Tommy was, how he was working and how lineage and how herbalism is passed down. One of my favorite stories from that book is how you saw the ginseng plant as a child. Kind of, you closed your eyes, I think, and you got this vision, this image of the outside of the plant. And I think that was is that an accurate story of how your ginseng identification discovery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an important point in my life, right? You know.
Yes. Yes, it felt poignant. It felt important in the book and in the way that you told that story. And it's interesting, having worked with children for so long here in this area, I can kind of, and also with plants too, understand kind of that visualization of a plant, and how maybe plants communicate on that level and how children are highly receptive to energies and energetic imprints of plants. Like for example, I worked with a little healing garden, and there was a child who rubbed rosemary and smelled it, and then looked at me and said, "Rosemary, it's for remembering things."
Yeah.
like
It's like, how did they
I'm like,
know?
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, you're absolutely correct. So it's just that strong, very sharp intuition that is just such a beautiful thing too. So that
Yeah,
I
And
totally understood.
and we all still have it. We just let it get sidetracked or overran with whatever is happening in the world, our daily life, and we stop relying on it. So, but I do believe we all still carry that with us. We have to just take the time and take a little chill time and be open to it still being there, and then practice, 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 continue to use it. So,
Yeah, and so this was a little segue from our topic of tonight, but I did want to bring that up because it was such a, and I love that this is the lesson of what we're talking about. I mean, it is just that deeper lesson of commitment, and kind of removing obstacles. So
mm.
that's really interesting. And so moving on, because Phyllis has quite the career, and that's what we're going to get into this evening, because I think my intention for moving with what I'm doing with this web show is to talk about being a practitioner and the future of integrative medicine, which Phyllis has so many examples of. She's really hardworking. She has a master's degree from the University of Alabama in health studies, education, nutrition, healthcare. She's taught CEU classes for allied healthcare professionals, experience in both clinical and private settings. At one point, I think you were involved in the AHG, the
Mhm.
American Herbalist Guild, which is kind of our like a body of practitioners that work in mentorship style to support the ongoing art and science of herbalism and to actually help facilitate the ability for other herbalists to also step into a clinical setting, and approach. Um, she maintains a clinical practice, and she's on the faculty of the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, another amazing herbalist, who, and you were very active, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, with like a YouTube and with TV channels and just different
Yes.
videos that y'all constructed together. So just so many wonderful things. So we're really, really happy to have you. and moving into some of the questions that our audience had, and just
Okay.
thinking about tonight, or thinking about the future of care, and just what that can look like based on what you've seen and witnessed over your career. You started with chiropractic partnerships, and working with
Yes.
chiropractors, and you worked closely with them. So, what made that partnership so impactful for patient care, working and collaborating as an herbalist and as a holistic mindset practitioner with a chiropractor who works with spinal cord?
Well, chiropractors, from my experience, are generally much more open-minded than, let's say, MDs, although I have worked with open-minded MDs. And chiropractics itself is more holistically oriented than what we think of the reductionist medical profession is. But so they were about the whole body, but specifically like pain relief, antispasmodic, um, but at the same time, you want to relieve the pain, you want to help the person feel better, but the whole person. And so it became a really neat partnership where somebody would go in to see the chiropractor and say, "Oh, my back is hurting." But as they're talking to the chiropractor, they'll go, "I'm having digestive problems, or I have this cough I can't get rid of." And so the chiropractor would say, "Oh, have you thought about, seeing Phyllis, with herbs and diet, etc." And so it became just a really kind of neat partnership. And so it worked out really well.
Yeah, and at what point did you begin to see the value of integrating approaches, and working in this way?
Always. I mean, I've always been an integratist because at some point, almost all of us need antibiotics. Absolutely, antibiotics save lives. And herbalism obviously can too, but sometimes those much stronger medications are needed. And before there were antibiotics, infections were the number one cause of death, period. I mean, so the infections still are in the top 10, but not where they were. And then also, we all need occasionally, if we have a car wreck and we need surgery, let's go to the emergency room. There's a point where both are needed. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is the old expression. And so the two can work together in a more integrative fashion. And so I think conventional medicine is excellent at acute situations, where herbalism and nutrition are really excellent at chronic issues. And so when we talk about a chronic issue, regular medicine tends to go toward suppressing the symptoms. Like, oh, here's a steroid, let's suppress the symptoms, or here's this medication for your allergy, let's suppress the symptom without looking for or dealing with the cause of what is causing that symptom. And so I think herbalism, we have to be good detectives. And with an integrative approach, we're going to get in there and figure out why that is happening. But at the same time, we want the person to be comfortable also. So there is not a suppression of the symptoms, but more like, how do we help this person feel better while dealing with the true issue that's taking place?
And yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And I imagine with like chiropractors and physical therapists, there's a lot going on that at every single session that could then be addressed in stages,
Right,
versus
right,
just like one outcome, reducing pain. Like there's always something happening every time you go in,
right.
and reduction of stress, and or releasing, expressing it, right?
Right. But I also worked in doctor's offices. I worked in a medical clinic and that had its own challenges because I'd never worked in a medical clinic before. So um, it was unique, but it was a great learning experience for me. I got to see how the other half lived and what they actually had to deal with as far as their pay and how insurance dealt with them. And so I had much more sympathy for doctors after having worked in a clinic because the insurance company would say, I'm not going to pay you unless you only have this many minutes, and
Mhm.
then you can only bill for this many minutes. And so I actually ended up working in a clinic where doctors did take insurance, but they kind of also had ways around that. And so they would actually listen to their patient's story and understand what was happening or try to understand. So that was like very eye-opening to work in a medical clinic. And that worked out really well. I was in a clinic. There were three doctors who worked in the clinic. One was very open and supportive and actually had brought me in. Truly believed in an integrative approach in herbalism. One was undecided and one was like, no, this doesn't work. I don't want this. And so it was challenging also to work with kind of like those three different attitudes toward what I was doing, especially when we were in a staffing situation where we were going over cases and then I would offer, what could be done herbally or what I was seeing, what that was going on, or my interpretation of the blood work. And, but over time, over like a year, because I was there about 2.5 years or so, I could see the one that had been the naysayer slowly softening up, thinking outside the box, so that is the important thing that I think conventional physicians who have never had any experience working with an herbalist or an integrative kind of specialist, that they're kind of stuck in the medical school box and it's hard to think outside that box. And so anything we can do as herbal practitioners to help folks kind of see something and maybe in a different way, kind of think outside that box, that's a really important aspect of working with kind of integrate in an integrative approach. We're thinking outside the box.
Yeah, that's really high value, all the things that you just said about and the inside of the communication and working with different personalities in a clinical setting and how maybe over time some things kind of the edges kind of softened a bit with more acclimation to the styles that you were both working within. So that's really excellent. What do you think herbalists uniquely contribute that other practitioners often can't?
And when you say other practitioners, are you talking about more conventional practitioners or?
I think any practitioner, holistic or conventional, what is, in your view, like what's unique about like the herbal contribution in the setting?
Well, I think that if you're a well-trained herbalist and that you understand the properties of herbs and you understand the person, I think one uniqueness is that herbalists see everyone as an individual. So it's not one herb fits all. And it certainly should not be this herb can only be used in this situation. So that's a very pharmaceutical approach to using herbs. And it's more about our uniqueness is more about here's an individual, this is their situation, here's their constitution, here are their patterns of dysfunction, this is what's going on in their life, and then designing a protocol just for them. And so that's very unique.
Yeah, I think that you're making a good point there that like distinguishing as an herbalist between just being knowledgeable and someone who can be clinically impactful. And then also the note of what herbs are and what are they not and that common misconception or societal standard or understanding about plants versus pharmaceuticals, which it is a common thing of what is this plant good for or what is this herb good for,
Right,
and there's many multiple intentions and multiple functions.
right.
So looking back, where did you see the most powerful results? Maybe some examples where you knew that herbal medicine was included.
Like unique cases, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you'd like
unique.
to share one, yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
I'll quickly share one. Once I had a client, this was at the medical center, who had autoimmune hepatitis and was on the liver transplant list and was having to wait. And while she was waiting, was coming to the integrative clinic for treatment. And if you're not familiar with some of the symptoms, there's a lot of fluid that gathers in the abdomen, like huge amount of fluid that gathers in the abdomen. And so she would come into the clinic, and one of the physicians would drain off that fluid. And it was quite a lengthy process. And then she would like see me, we'd talk about her diet, and we'd talk about herbs. And initially, I was like the standard herbs, you would think about for the liver. Oh, let's try some milk thistle or blessed thistle. Oh, this is an autoimmune disorder where her body is actually attacking her own liver. And after going through a few different kind of protocols and trying to taper everything, and I went back to my roots. I went way back to my roots, and I was like, what would Granny do? I mean, and that was like literally what would Granny do? I've got to put the science over and to the side because all the kind of herbs that I was using all had kind of like clinical research to go behind it. Oh, milk thistle can do this, blah, blah, blah. And so I went back to, what it would Granny do? And it was two herbs, cayenne and yellow root.
Mm.
And so I said, "Hey, have you tried cayenne?" And she was like, "No." And so she actually, we got her cayenne capsules. And when she came back to the clinic 2 days later, because she had to come every 2 days to get the fluid drained off, she said to me, when I took that cayenne capsule within 15, 20 minutes, I felt like something turned on in my body. She said, I felt like
Mm.
something turned on in my body. And she started improving after that. She literally started, and everything started changing. And then yellow root was very like traditional of little sticks of the stem that she just chewed on. And within 6 weeks, she no longer had autoimmune hepatitis. She wasn't doing anything, but she stopped doing everything except the cayenne and the yellow root sticks. She got off the transplant list. Her doctor called it a spontaneous remission, and she never had it since. Right.
That's amazing. Wow.
But
Yeah,
it
I mean,
But it
tapping in.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
but I went back to like Southern folk medicine, my roots to kind of like dig. So one of the impactful things, obviously it was impactful for her, because, she got totally healed and back to normal. But for me, it was like, never forget your roots.
That's a great
Science is
lesson.
good, but don't forget your roots.
Yeah, no, that's a great lesson. As we layer on more and more training and abilities to care for others, there's also that like intuitive pull and also our ancestral healing abilities. So, and lineage, which is definitely your story and your legacy for sure. So thank you for sharing that case study. How critical do you think, though, is consistency and adherence when it comes to herbal protocols? Like how in complex cases?
That's very important, and that's a very hard thing. So, my philosophy is baby steps. And so I never recommend a giant amount of things. I know some practitioners, they might recommend 5 or 6 or 8 different things for a person to do, including vitamins and herbs or supplements. At that point, it can be very hard for a person to adhere to that, especially if they're not used to taking that many supplements. So my philosophy is baby steps, and I'll say we're just going to start with these 2 things. I want you to get used to taking these 2 things on a regular basis, and then we're going to touch base in 3 weeks, or we're going to touch base in 4 weeks. I'm going to see how you're doing. Then I'm going to add something in, or I might take one of those out, or I'm going to do a reevaluation, and you might have a couple more things to take. And so I've found that people really stick to it a lot better if you do these baby steps and add things in instead of going like, here's all this at one time. All right. And they
Yeah,
might do that for a day or two, and then they don't do it. And then they've got money they've invested in products or herbs or
right.
consultation, and it's just gone to waste. So,
Waste.
baby steps.
Yeah, that's really critical. And I love that you brought that up because people are looking for low waste and sustainable options to their daily healthcare needs and their ability to maintain their own practices in healthcare. So where do you see, let's talk about the future. Where do you see the integration of herbal medicine, I mean, fitting into the future of healthcare? We've got AI, we've got all kinds of things going on, and you've been part of that wave. So what do you see coming on?
Well, I think, like AI can have a place in that, but also found that like Chat GPT, I actually know a case where it saved a person's life because
Yes.
while they were in the hospital, in the emergency room, getting worse, the husband says, "Let me just put all your symptoms into Chat GPT," and came up with something, not what the doctors had said in the emergency room, but brought it in and said, "Oh, how could it be this?" And because he did that, his wife had surgery and it saved her life. She was in
Yeah.
surgery 15 minutes later. But what I find with the herbs is they just kind of pick the same 10 herbs over and over and over and over. It was like whatever is popular or whatever the best sellers are. How many times does turmeric come up?
Yeah,
Or
it's true.
ginger, or basil, or rosemary. They just come up over and over and over. And so it's very limiting to the apothecary. And it's limiting to what people are learning. How many times do you see ginger come up?
Right.
Right?
No, you're right. We're getting limited in our scope instead of the broader picture.
That's right. So from that point of view, I don't like it, you know?
Yeah.
And people who are now saying, I've been trained in herbalism, they know what, 20 herbs, maybe, maybe.
Yeah, and we should know more because that's
Yeah,
a building of that development and that awareness and the lexicon, the vocabulary. Yeah, that's very
yeah.
interesting.
I
Well, I
think
feel
the
like we could go on. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the American Herbalist Guild is saying like 150.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could go on forever and ever. It's been such a fabulous beginning conversation talking to you, Phyllis. And we're going to share your website in our post. And we really appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit of your experience today with us.
Thank you. And I do have an herb school in Alabama if anybody is interested.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll share your website and we'll continue to promote this episode. If you like what you heard, definitely subscribe to our YouTube, follow Phyllis. There's so many more insights that can be shared about her experience on her website. And we look forward to having you back on the show to talk some more about the
Thank you.
industry.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good night. Bye.
Good night.